As we mentioned before, I sat down yesterday. Senator Sanders, who obviously is a very busy man at this point, gave me 30 minutes of his time to delve deep into the reconciliation bill. That was really the thing that he was most excited about talking about. He also spent some time aggressively trashing the media, which was interesting. And I actually think that's why he wanted to, because they reached out to me. Yeah. We actually didn't approach them because he felt so frustrated that he never gets a single substantive question from mainstream media, which I also thought was just interesting and telling in terms of his mindset. But I tried to push him on his impression of the Biden administration seems to be very different from my impression of the Biden administration, right? He still uses this language sometimes about FDR. He certainly sees his reconciliation bill as incredibly significant. And I do think it's fair to say, if the $3.5 trillion gets through as it is now, it is quite significant. Is it everything we would? Of course not. But universal pre-K and free community college and investments in climate and all of these things, like these are good and significant and long-term things. The child tax credit, I did a whole thing here about how significant that ultimately is. But he seems to have this view that Biden is really doing everything he can and like that this is historic and it's different from the way that past Democratic presidents have acted. And of course, I very much disagree. I don't understand why we're allowing a Senate parliamentarian to like dictate what the agenda is going to be. I don't understand why you're just going along with keeping the filibuster, this arcane Senate procedure in place. I don't understand why you're not using executive actions to do many of the things that you could ultimately do. So we had a little exchange on that. Let's take a listen.
For whatever reason, you know, Biden came into office and he looked around him and he said, you know what? Climate is an existential threat. We have got to deal with it. Yes, the working class has been decimated for decades now. We have got to address that. So what he did that no president, and you correct me if you think I'm misstating this, what he did said, well, we're going to spend 3% more here and 5% more there. What he said, these are the issues. We are going to deal with the needs of the children. We are going to deal with the needs of the elderly. We are going to deal with climate. We are going to deal with paid family and medical leave. We are going to deal with housing. Virtually every major crisis that we are facing, he is prepared to deal with. I have not seen a president in my lifetime who has done that. Am I wrong?
I see that perspective. But I also see a president who's willing to let a lot of those agenda items be killed by the filibuster and the parliamentarian. Right.
Well, but again, I don't want to defend him. I think the point you made a few minutes ago is exactly right. In this critical moment, when we're dealing with the future of the planet, when we're dealing with the future of democracy, you know what? I think majority should rule and not the. I believe that strongly. But don't think that he can snap his fingers, no matter what he may or may not believe, and make things happen. All right, there are senators.
There are certain things he could do, though, through executive act. For example, canceling student debt.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There are things he can
legalizing marijuana.
Yes.
He could potentially do through an executive order. And so there hasn't been a willingness, even though he says, yes, I support the $15 minimum wage. Yes, I support the PRO Act, to use all the tools that are at his disposal to actually make those things happen.
You're absolutely sure of that.
Is that fair?
No. I mean, in other words, you do not know about the discussions that he has with people who walk into his office. Okay. No, it's wrong to assume that when you're dealing with a United States senator who does not want to end the filibuster, that he can go in there and say, hey, I want you to do that. No. So don't give the president...
Although he could do what you proposed. When you were asked on the trail, how would you deal with Senator Manchin? You said, I'd go to West Virginia. I'd do the rally. Yeah. I'd call him out.
Right. I mean, there are things you could do. All that I'm saying, do not minimize. I mean, and I don't want to get into personalities, but any member of the United States Senate has the power to kill this thing. And to think that the president alone can change that is not 100% correct.
Sure. But there are executive actions that he could take on student debt and other things that he could do. We can agree on that,
I am not, yes. You know, Joe Biden and I, marijuana, I think the war on drugs has been just a disaster for this country, for the African-American community. I think it should end. I think marijuana should be legalized. You're right. We do that fairly simply. But, yeah, so we have differences. But on this piece of legislation, at the end of the day, if we are successful, this will be a major, major achievement.
So,
interesting, Krystal.
Yeah, so
pushed him a little bit.
Couldn't really disagree.
I don't really know who this guy is. When did Mr. Institutionalist? I gotta say, this is very, very out of character for him. It makes sense in the context of your interview. Look, Bernie, the reason he's talking this way, he's a Senate budget chairman now, which is frankly, at least at this moment, one of the, what is he? Probably the third most powerful person in Washington behind Chuck Schumer.
I mean, at this exact moment, he is that. And I actually talked to him about. I asked him, "Do you still see yourself as an outsider?" Because I wanted to see what that's been who he has been for 40 years. Yeah. Even when he was mayor of Berlin, he was still the outsider. He's a socialist mayor, right? Probably the only one in the country at the time. And then you're seen as this gadfly in the House, and then you're seen as this gadfly in the Senate, and you're just out there throwing bombs. You're taking the 99-to-1 votes and all of that stuff. And now you're in the room. Now you're the one who's thinking about like, oh God, I gotta not say anything that's gonna piss off Joe Manchin and lose his support because I gotta get this.
And you could see that very clearly.
I gotta get this bill done. But it's not in his nature to spin in the way that most politicians do. So he just sort of grants like,
he's like, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and then you're right. What can I say?
It's like, yeah, dude, but what are you going to do? Are you going to do something about it? Are you going to say anything about it? I just can't. Okay, compared to what he was on the campaign, I don't think a campaign person would accept any of these excuses.
The other piece is, we talked about, and by the way, the whole interview, 30 minutes long, which I do think is very revealing of his current mindset, his current role, how he sees himself as in a different place than where he was in other years, et cetera, is going to be on Krystal and Friends tomorrow, so you can sub on Substack in order to see the whole thing, which I do think is worth a watch, and he does say some things about the media that y'all are going to appreciate. But I do think that I also pushed him on, okay, why is it only the Manchins and the Gottheimers and the Salt Tax Caucus over there in the House? Why are they always the ones who are willing to walk away? And progressives, we don't see that. We don't see red lines drawn and we're going to withhold our support. He felt like maybe some of what's being done by the Progressive Caucus isn't being seen publicly, that this behind the scenes, they're very influential. And so the bills are he framed it as like the bills are coming out in a more progressive direction. So that's happening ahead of time. And then it's the right wing that's trying to pull it back. I just don't agree with that. When you see, $15 minimum wage off the table, public option off the table. He did say that lowering the Medicare age may still be possible within this reconciliation bill. So we'll see. Yeah. All the climate change provisions were stripped down of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Like a lot of progressive priorities, frankly, no progressive priority has been implemented yet on a permanent basis. There were some short-term things in the relief bill that were very good, but it's hard for me to celebrate like, okay, you had these short-term things which reduced poverty and were great, but are we actually going to get to any of these bigger, broader programs that we're talking about? And I think he would himself say, like, don't know. It's a work in progress, and we'll see. So, very interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was. I think watching the full thing is important for people because understanding and watching this outsider become the Senate budget chairman, and then I love how he's defending Biden. He's like, you don't know what's going on in the Oval Office. I'm like, what happened to you?
You're right. Yeah, I said, he could do, because this is something that drives me crazy, is Barack Obama does the same thing of pretending like the votes are set and there's nothing you can do, and as the president, you're totally powerless. And it's like, you had an answer for you got asked this question all the time on the trail, and you had an answer for it. You were going to go to their districts. You were going to be in West Virginia. You were going to put the pressure on. And look, maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but you can at least try. Yeah. And again, he can't really. It's not in his nature to spin, so he just kind of has to be like...
Yeah, he just sits there.
Yeah, you're kind of right.
He's like, yep.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.